The school board members didn't even let him finish his final sentence. After 32 years of teaching in the same small town, Mr. Daniel Carter stood in front of a room full of people who once called him family. But now, they wouldn't even look him in the eyes. The principal placed the termination letter on the table and pushed it toward him. Your services are no longer required. Daniel stared at the paper silently. Not because he was shocked, but because he already knew this day was coming. The room was filled with whispers. Some parents looked uncomfortable. Some teachers looked away. And sitting at the front of the room was the new superintendent, Richard Blake, a wealthy businessman who had never stepped inside a classroom until 6 months ago. He leaned back in his chair with a confident smile. Times have changed, Mr. Carter. This school needs progress, not outdated methods. Daniel slowly looked up. Outdated methods. Richard smiled. Yes, students today need modern education, not stories, life lessons, and old-fashioned discipline. A few people laughed, quietly, but Daniel heard them. After 3 decades of teaching children who had nothing, he was being treated like he was nothing. Richard opened a folder. Your teaching performance has been inconsistent. Your graduation rates are average. Your methods are questionable. Daniel looked at the numbers. Then he noticed something. The documents had been edited. The results from his classes were missing. Awards were removed. Student achievements were erased. Everything that proved his impact was gone. Daniel looked at the board members. You already decided before this meeting started. Nobody answered, because they knew he was right. Richard leaned forward. This isn't personal. Daniel gave a tired smile. That's what people say when it becomes personal. The room became silent. Then Richard pushed the termination papers closer. Sign it. Daniel looked at the signature line. For 32 years, he had signed hundreds of report cards, hundreds of recommendations, hundreds of letters telling students they could become something greater. But this was the first time his name felt heavy. He picked up the pen. Everyone expected anger. A fight. A speech. But Daniel simply signed. He placed the pen down, stood up, and walked out. Nobody stopped him. Nobody thanked him. Nobody followed. At least, that's what everyone thought. Because they didn't know what was about to happen. They didn't know the quiet teacher they just removed had changed the lives of thousands. And they definitely didn't know his former students were coming back. Daniel Carter lived in a small farmhouse outside town. The same farmhouse he bought when he was 28 years old. Back then, he was a young teacher with no money, no connections, no powerful family, just a belief that every child deserved someone who believed in them. People laughed when he said that. They told him, kids from this town don't go far. But Daniel never believed that. Every morning for 32 years, he unlocked the same classroom door. He arrived before sunrise. He repaired broken desks, cleaned chalkboards, bought supplies with his own money when the school budget disappeared. And every year, students walked into his classroom thinking they weren't smart enough. Until Daniel proved them wrong. There was Marcus, a boy who couldn't read properly at age 12. Everyone labeled him a failure. Daniel stayed after school every day. 1 hour, then 2, until Marcus finally read his first full page. Years later, Marcus became a doctor. There was Emily, a quiet girl who never spoke in class. Daniel discovered she was secretly writing stories. He encouraged her. Today, her books were sold around the world. There was James, a troubled teenager everyone wanted expelled. Daniel saw something nobody else saw. A leader. James eventually became a firefighter. But the school board forgot those stories. Because stories don't fit into spreadsheets. And powerful people only see numbers. 3 days after Daniel was fired, something strange happened. The school announced a celebration. Richard Blake called it the beginning of a new era. They invited local officials, business owners, media. They wanted everyone to see the changes. The old teacher was gone. The school was moving forward. But halfway through the event, Richard received a message. He looked at his phone. Then his confident expression disappeared. Another message came. Then another. Within minutes, his assistant rushed toward him. Sir, you need to see this. Richard followed her outside. A crowd was gathering near the school entrance. At first, he thought it was a protest. Then he saw the cars. Hundreds of them. Luxury vehicles. Police cars. Ambulances. Company trucks. People stepping out wearing suits, uniforms, and professional badges. Richard frowned. What is this? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew either. until one woman walked forward. She was wearing a white doctor's coat. Richard recognized her name. Dr. Emily Parker, one of the most successful doctors in the state. She looked at the school building, then at Richard. "We heard Mr. Carter was fired." Richard smiled nervously. "And?" Emily looked around. "And we came back." Within 1 hour, the school entrance was surrounded. Former students. Hundreds of them. Some traveled from different states. Some flew overnight. Some left important meetings. All for one reason. Daniel Carter. Richard stepped outside. "This is unnecessary." Emily looked at him. "No. What happened was unnecessary." Richard tried to remain calm. Mr. Carter was removed because of performance issues. Then another person stepped forward. A man wearing a firefighter uniform. Captain James Wilson. "I wouldn't be alive today without him." Richard rolled his eyes. "That's emotional, but—" James interrupted. "No." His voice became serious. "You don't understand." He pointed toward the school. "When I was 15, everyone told me I was dangerous. They wanted me gone." He looked at the crowd. But Mr. Carter stayed. His voice cracked. "He told me I wasn't my worst mistake." The crowd became silent. James looked back at Richard. "He saved my life." Then another person stepped forward. Then another. A lawyer. An engineer. A military officer. A business owner. A scientist. All former students. All carrying the same message. Mr. Carter didn't just teach subjects. He changed people. But Richard wasn't ready to lose. He called an emergency board meeting. He believed he could control the situation, because money had always solved his problems before. Inside the meeting room, he placed documents on the table. Feelings don't run schools. He looked at the board. Evidence does. He showed financial reports, student statistics, performance records. Mr. Carter's methods were outdated. Then the door opened. Everyone turned. Daniel Carter walked in. For the first time in days, the room became silent. Richard smiled. "Back already?" Daniel looked at him. "No." He placed a folder on the table. Letters. Awards. Proof. But there was something else. A hidden document. One Richard never expected. 30 years earlier, the school district had created a special program. A mentorship system. A program designed by Daniel Carter. Its purpose was simple. Find struggling students. Help them. Track their progress. Give them opportunities. But the program was never officially recognized. Why? Because the previous administration ignored it. They didn't care. Until now. Daniel placed the final document on the table. This program created more successful graduates than any other system in the district. The board members looked shocked. Richard grabbed the papers. "This doesn't prove anything." Daniel calmly replied. "Actually, it proves everything." He pointed to the signature. The original approval. Signed by the former superintendent. Richard's own father. The room froze. Because Richard knew exactly what this meant. His father had known. His father had supported Daniel. And Richard had erased everything to push his own agenda. But Richard had one last move. He stood up. "You still don't understand how the world works, Daniel." He looked at him. "People like you teach." He smiled. "People like me make decisions." Daniel didn't respond. He simply looked toward the door. Then the doors opened. And more people entered. The students. Hundreds of them. But this time, they weren't just former students. They were leaders. They placed documents on the table. Donation records. Scholarship programs. Community projects. Everything they created because of Daniel's influence. Emily stepped forward. "You said he didn't create results." She placed a folder down. "Then explain why every successful person from this town is here because of him." Richard looked around. For the first time, he had no answer. The school board reversed the decision that same day. Richard Blake resigned weeks later after investigations revealed he manipulated records to remove Daniel. But Daniel refused every offer to become superintendent. When people asked why, he gave the same answer. "I never wanted a title. I wanted students to believe they mattered." Months later, the school created a new program. The Daniel Carter Scholarship. Every year, students received support to chase dreams they thought were impossible. And on the first day of the new school year, Daniel walked back into the classroom. The students stood and applauded. Not because he was powerful, not because he was famous, but because he was the person who believed in them when nobody else did. He placed his books on the desk, looked at the class, and smiled. "All right, who's ready to surprise the world?" And outside that classroom, the entire town finally understood something. A great teacher doesn't just prepare students for life. A great teacher changes the people who change the world.